Good evening, everybody. As rightly introduced on economy, right? So jokingly, someone asked me that how is economy doing? I said, yes, everywhere it's echoing, no money, no money. So that's what economy is all about right now. Well, things are tough, and as it says that, if tough gets going, right, you have to become more tough. So then the best way is to start looking at performance. Right, so suddenly someone said that, okay, how is my CFO doing today, right? Well, he was busy because he's just looking at the bottom line right now. So once the bottom line is effective, that's a straight away upgradation from a CFO to CEO. So from a performance perspective, it's more seen that should I see a P&L balance sheet or a cash flow. So today, people talk about enterprise performance management, which talks about systems, develop strategies, develop plans, then what you do, monitor, start executing it, report results. It all gets into purely looking at numbers. So organizations today have measured themselves to look at performance management not just in a vertical way but in a completely horizontal way, which leads to the key thought in terms of, is performance just to look at the past of what's happening, or to look at the greater potential which is forward, which is just like driving a car. Looking at a rear view tells me what's happening, but then I need to look forward. That's what helps me to drive EPM today. And today's challenges, organizations, 10 years back, 12 years back, the strategy was more in terms of last 3 years or 5 years I've been doing performance have been so much, so next 3 years we are going to increase it by 10% or 15%. But now people are talking about acquisitions, people are talking about inorganic growth, re-engineering the organizations, too many words and jargons which are being used to look at the situation of performance management. So the whole thing goes to say that if you don't drive your business, right, you'll be driven out of business. So how am I going to effectively drive the business? So that's the key challenge, and that's what leading companies are refocusing their entire efforts in not just improvising, but also putting in integrated performance, which provides the decision makers to link the financial and non-financial information regarding business performance, which means that every individual organization has gone into playing the role of business ownership. Those days are gone where they were one strategist who was to strategize for the entire organization, say that how is the market is going, how the target segment customers are growing, and then come and define a strategy. Today it's become the ownership of every business head to effectively take a decision call for the business. And most often it's also seen that when a strategy has been talked about, it's been assumed that it's the job of the finance. So thus, when it comes to the business users, you find a strategic dilution taking place. So there's a top-down strategy visioning which percolates downwards. So a strategy dilution ends up when the strategy is not being percolated downwards, and make sure that everyone in the organization knows what is the strategy of the company. Thus, his activities and his measures is directly responsible and proportional to the strategy. Now that is where the entire performance management gets driven. And I have seen organizations, when they talk about performance management, it's sometimes suddenly seen as an HR initiative and talk about performance improvement, right, versus performance management. So performance management is basically a focused improvement effort, which is around the cycle, and it's an ongoing exercise. So the whole area of integrating a performance management is not just looking at silos of data or silos of report, but improve the processes from a planning, budgeting, and forecasting scenario. How am I going to plan better? Why should I plan better? So I have a strategic vision, I have a 5-year plan, and I have an AOP, an annual operating plan. Now that plan has to be percolated downwards, right? Thus your budgeting exercise also gets linked with your planning numbers. The plan is basically what I intend to do, and budget is basically that in order to achieve this, what are the numbers or the measures which I need to look at. Second, more important is in terms of the financial reporting and operational reporting. How quick am I in a position to react to what's happened? Quite often, whenever there's a month-end close meeting or a management review meeting, end of the month, till the lunch, what gets debated is whether this data is correct or not, whether the actuals which you have got is right or not, whereas my reports are saying something else. rather than looking at what is the business performance. So more important is to incorporate performance-related methodologies, right? Like activity-based management, ABC, right? Balanced scorecard. More important is tracking performances by inducting the habit of doing forecasting at the business users level, right? And not just extrapolating the P&L balance sheets. And more important, tools to capture and sustain informations. Even today, when we look at the planning and budgeting process, right, or even for that matter, doing an analysis, right, what is given is basically tons and tons of data. I have seen organizations, believe me, gentlemen, in spite of having 10 years of ERP data or 20 years of ERP data, what is relevant for information is only 10 to 12%, which goes to prove that any data which is not used is redundant. If someone claims that I have mobile numbers of 50,000 customers or 1 lakh customers, and if that gentleman has not even called me, right, I would have changed my number. So it doesn't matter having tons and tons of data. The relevance is the information. And I have practically experienced when I started my career after passing out from my management institute, right, I was to Gango being a strategy manager for a company. And every evening my boss used to come and pat me saying that, so what are you doing? And I used to have a lot of Excel sheets in front of me. And he used to very nicely call me a housekeeping manager of Excel files. Right? All I used to do is only manage Excel files. Right? And I had my assistant, Mr. Anand, who was a very smart guy. And he was very good in Excel. Right? And he was too proud of it because everyone were dependent on him. Because he was the only guy who knows Excel. And he had a small button, a yellow button, saying that, sir, once you have arrived at all your budget numbers, let me know, I'll click this button. He said, what is that? Well, that will just push in 0.01 numbers in all the cells so that I'm sure that my Control C and Control V has not failed anyway, right? So the process here is not there. It's more on believing what you have in Excel spreadsheets. And that is the key important part. Today, if you see the transaction processing and the cost involved in the transaction analysis becoming huge, bigger and bigger. And what is left for the Office of Finance, for the financial analysis, has to move, has to split into business people analyzing the business, financial people analyzing the financials, and the transaction processing analysis should be very minimal. The goal is to split the transaction cost into business analysis and function analysis. And that is where the effectiveness will come if the timely information is delivered to the decision makers in time, right? Which means optimal forecasting and not reactive forecasting. How often I'm able to forecast quicker, right, and take necessary decisions rather than wait for something which has happened and then say, find out reasons for why it has happened. Finally, in order to be capable, right, organizations today are anywhere in these 5 buckets. Organizations are maybe at the non-existence level where there's no formal planning process, it's just for people number driven, or people have gone into a very advanced level of planning, enterprise-wide planning, where every cost center is responsible for the number he's submitting, and he also knows the effect of his number, how it is linked with the strategic vision. Is he deviating or is he coming closer to that? And gentlemen, more important, and lady, more important is that how closer I am monitoring my strategic vision. Right? So this are the key things which leads an organization to be in the top 5 as the best planning or performance management team, or just being in the development stage. And more important is coming out of certain basic tools and make the new technologies as enablers. Organizations have implemented SAPs, Oracles and everything. So what has that taught them? What has that made them today is that we have become very efficient having the ERPs in place. But what is important now is the effectiveness. How can I become more effective by having the best of the systems in place? That's what leads to the overall process. Just very few statistics which has come in mind is saying that every organization says that I take 3 months to do my planning cycle, but an average study says 100 days. But what is spent in that is not just the entire planning, but the number of versions, the number of iterations which goes into it, right? So there's a best cut number, they're nice to have. So the more important is how to reduce your planning process so that you gain management approvals with a very effective solutions, the what-if analysis, which leads to the second thing. What I have done with having so much of silos of systems, I have automated inefficiency to what degree? So when it comes to heterogeneous solutions like planning or BI, the business the tool should be able to adopt the business, because your planning process, your reporting and analysis is very heterogeneous driven. It's not purely homogeneous. And that's where quite often people have seen that planning and reporting the wrong stuff. Most of the organizations go on to look at the existing data values, to look at the analysis, but not having the key KPIs in place, like attracting new customers, retaining new customers, and so on and so forth. That is the reason why we say that when you say I'm budgeting, so what is that? You're budgeting is you're budgeting numbers. And whereas planning is basically leads importance to the process of businesses, process of profitability, the process of cost, and that's very important. So when the planning becomes the key essential in any performance management metrics, right? I need to have my vision clear, have my vision drilled down to the lowest level of the organization, so that my planning process is owned by most of the people. And being an increasing volatile world today, and that too with too much of inconsistencies happening around, the focus should be more on customer acquisitions, retentions, talent development, and not just on reducing of costs, which becomes purely a number crunching exercise. And more important, I have seen organizations taking too much of detail into their performance process,